Good morning, everybody. We have a critical vote that is coming up this Thursday on the question as to whether the City Council will override or sustain my veto involving rideshare, Uber and Lyft in the city of Minneapolis. There is a way, as I've mentioned before, where we can get a win for everyone. We can get drivers paid substantially more. We can keep this important service that is Uber and Lyft in our city, and we can make sure that all the people that rely on this important service continue to get it. Whether you're a person that doesn't own a car, you're a tourist at the airport, or an individual who's disabled that just needs to get from point A to point B with as much convenience as possible. Now, importantly, one of the last times that I did a press conference on the topic, I talked about the importance of waiting for the study. We shouldn't be afraid of data, we should be embracing it. We shouldn't be ignoring studies that come out, we should be utilizing them and creating the best possible policy. And the state, and specifically the Department of Labor, came out with a study involving 18 million rides that were analyzed. And they brought forward a series of figures that would allow both drivers to make a minimum wage, to make the minimum wage with expenses and benefits, and keep rideshare in the city at the same time. What was shown by that study is that the proposal that the council made was dramatically off. The proposal that the council put forward was wrong. Their stated position was that this was the way to get drivers to a minimum wage. In fact, there is a substantially lower rate that will both get drivers a minimum wage and will have expenses covered. And I want to reference the state study in doing so. The state study found that 89 cents a mile and 49 cents per minute would both allow drivers to make the minimum wage and also important expenses, including vehicle expenses, cell phone, car cleaning, vehicle registration, and I believe several others as well. That's just to make the baseline expenses. Now, if you wanted to get additional benefits, things like earn sick and safe, retirement, unemployment insurance, health insurance, you could get the full Cadillac version, and that's $1.20 and 49 cents, which is also and still substantially below the policy that the council put out. While I can't predict the future, I do believe that if the veto is overridden, and if there is not a subsequent policy that comes out through the state, that Uber and Lyft will leave the city on the effective date, which is May 1st. That has mass repercussions for people, not just in Minneapolis, but in the entire region. We can't be operating just in a sphere of politics here. We got to be doing what is right for people in our city. And what is right for people in our city is to get drivers paid more, in this case, paid substantially more, and keep this important service in the city. Now, we do have some additional information as to what has happened in other cities as well, even when Uber and Lyft does not move out. I have talked with the Department of Labor, and there are a couple things that often happen. One, and this is always the case, supply and demand does have an impact, and there is a lesser demand as the price increases for any given service. That's always the case. But secondly, as you increase the rate that drivers are able to be paid, more drivers want to be paid that amount. And so more drivers will then enter the platform, diminishing the amount of money that each individual driver will be able to make. Those things have been found in other cities, and so we need to strike the right balance. There is a balance here where we can get drivers paid a rate that is substantially higher. I want to sign that ordinance. And we need to keep ride sharing in our city at the same time. And so the ask here is twofold. The ask is one, do not override the present veto. It will have serious repercussions for the city of Minneapolis. I want to go on the record telling you that right now. We need to be adults about this. We need to be operating in reality. And the reality is that the council ordinance they put forward was dramatically off. The second thing is we need to pass an ordinance that actually increases the rates for drivers at the right level, at a balanced level, that makes sure that their total take-home is improved and makes sure that people who need ride service in the city are able to get it. So those are the two asks right now. I'm hopeful that we've got a route to get to exactly that, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. I met with a number of rideshare drivers over the weekend, including MOLDA members as well as MRDA, and both were hoping to strike a balance. They were not in support of the council's ordinance, and they wanted to see an ordinance that would actually allow them to get paid more while keeping the jobs in this city. And so with that, I'll open it to questions that you might have.
Are you saying you have MOLDA members? MOLDA members testified, I believe, at the public hearing in favor of the ordinance. Are you saying that they've switched now?
I can't speak for every one of them, but that was my understanding in the meeting that we had.
Is it MOLDA members, as in MOLDA, with, like members with a lowercase m, or members with, because they're two different?
Yes, MOLDA members and MOLDA are different entities, is my understanding.
You said last week, $1.20 would keep the companies in town. Is that still your position? Is that you are looking for a compromise on a rate of $1.20 a mile?
So I support what the state data says, period. The state data gives a range through which you could get anything from simply a minimum wage with expenses all the way up to long-term benefits like retirement, health insurance, and unemployment insurance. I would support what the state report says, which I think really calls the question is if we care about data, let's follow it. The city staff, when they provided a report, they were simply doing what was asked of them by the city council. That was not a full-blown report. It did not analyze a single drive. They didn't talk to Uber or Lyft. They didn't get any additional data or information on that front. They weren't asked to. City staff did exactly what they were asked to do, and then there have since been conclusions that have been drawn from that data by members of the city council that are simply not true. And that's played out. We've seen that in real time through the report that's come out by the state. And by the way, you don't need to take my word for this. Read the state report. The state report gives a full analysis on all of this. So this is not something that you just quote the mayor, quote the city council. You do not need to take my word for it. Look at the state report. It lays it out. The figure that the council provided is dramatically off.
Mayor, I understand that this was pitched to us as there would be drivers here. I understand it's Ramadan, but in about an hour there's going to be a hearing before the Senate Labor Committee on that bill. And it's my understanding that MOLDA is going to be there in force, in numbers. If that in fact happens, what are we to take away from the fact that they were able to marshal numbers there and we've got no one here except you?
I think it's a fair question to ask. That being said, MOLDA, the support for a legislative initiative is not necessarily or at all mutually exclusive from the city's, a position in an ordinance from the city. You can be supportive of both of these. In fact, I'm quite confident that MOLDA members would be supportive ultimately of a statewide initiative as well. I certainly am. So you could find me myself at the Capitol as well, and perhaps that's part of the conflict here. I wouldn't be surprised if that is the conflict. And so I think on the whole, just a scheduling issue.
Are you making preparations for other rideshare companies to come in and potentially fill the void? Are you looking ahead to that at this point as well as?
We aren't yet, in that we will not be able to fill the void in this short period of time. So you're not able to prop up an entire technology platform and a new rideshare entity that can handle the numbers that we're talking about in a month-plus period. And so that's just, it's not realistic. And that's why we're trying to figure out a solution where, yes, we could invite in more rideshare platforms to exist in the city. We are doing that right now. But again, Uber and Lyft are private sector companies, and to the extent there's others, they're certainly welcome to join. I don't think we should be pushing out the technology in this very important service, though.
When you vetoed the bill, I think the word you used was optimistic that an override would happen. You said you were hopeful, and then I think I pressed, and I think you said you were optimistic. How are you feeling about, about the veto standing? Yeah. The override vote failed.
I'm still optimistic. I don't yet have a firm vote count, but I am optimistic, and I'm optimistic because of two reasons. One, we've heard from quite a few drivers that there is deep consternation in moving forward with the present proposal. Again, they all want to increase the rates, and so do I. This is an important distinction that is not often made. I support a dramatic increase in the rates. So do drivers. There's a balance, however, that needs to be struck, and that balance needs to be based on data. The data wasn't used. It was ignored in crafting the council proposal. Now that we have the data, let's use it. And let's use it to create good policy.
What have you heard from Uber and Lyft as this discussion has been evolving over these last few days?
Their position hasn't changed. In that if the proposal moves forward at the present level, they will leave on the effective date. That is what they're telling us. I was told that this was not a political move, but a necessity, and that they're backed into a corner and losing money at the rate, will lose money at the rate that the council has proposed. Now, that's their statement.
The state of rideshare right now, which a lot of us are doing as this is happening. Look back, I don't remember what year it was, but I believe you were the lead author of the ordinance that licensed the rideshare drivers to come in. It was one of the more permissive ones, I think, in the country at the time. Can you reflect a little bit on the state of things and the fact that we're now in a discussion about raising the standards for the drivers?
Sure, I can. As you recall, back 10 years ago, Uber and Lyft came into the city without any regulation accompanying it. There was no regulation. We had an ordinance that applied to taxi service and nothing else. And there was an argument, a strong argument, that Uber and Lyft itself was different than a taxi and therefore required different regulation. I think most everybody agreed with that, given the independent contractor nature, given the fact that you could use your own car and not necessarily one that was issued by the company itself. There were a number of pretty significant differences that prevented the existing taxi cab ordinance to function as one for ride sharing. And so we both regulated and legalized Uber and Lyft in the city. Now, frustratingly so, they were already operating here in some form, as you recall. There was deep frustration at the time, certainly by me and many others, that they didn't wait for the regulation to get set up. And so we set a regulation that would both regulate and legalize and license rideshare services, and now we're amending it. I mean, I think that's just the general nature of how regulation works. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the Civilian Oversight Commission resignations recently. 2 people resigned in the last few days, I think. What's your reaction to their departures, and do you think it'll complicate the city's ability to comply with the Department of Human Rights agreement?
No, I don't think that alone complicates our ability to comply. We are moving forward expeditiously in hiring a new civil rights director, and we're also working very hard to eliminate the backlog of cases or a backlog of complaints that are presently issued, and so we're working towards that right now.
What do you make of their specific, the issues that those departing employees cited in the resignations?
they were citing personnel information that they don't have.
Thank you. I'm sorry again.
Yep. And then finally, to Dave's question, I do think that that's a good chance. We're still looking into it, but they could very well be. It's the conflict between the state's work and ours, and couldn't do two things at once. We're looking into it, though. Thanks.